of Education. I'd like to ask if there is any consideration for open session agenda changes. All right. Seeing none, I entertain a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Motion.
Motion by Ms. Ida to accept the March 24th, 2021 meeting agenda of the Camden County Board of Education.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Purcell. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. First item of business is Mr. Rick Ott and Ms. Ashley Dennis to discuss our new high school project. Turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We've been hard at work this past week. I want to thank Ashley. She was up very late last night working on additional information for you folks. And so I think we got a good presentation for you. I won't go back and rehash a lot of information. You did ask that we bring some things back to you, which we are. I will also say that we brought some additional information. Prior to the last board meeting, Dr. Farrell and I had a conversation about some of the options. And I reminded him that we had, after getting all the staff input, we had deviated from the original program that the board had approved. And so in some subsequent meetings we had this week, I brought that back up again, that we had deviated from what the board had originally approved. And I thought it was worthwhile that we at least provide that option for the board to review so you can see what had already been approved. And so we also, in addition to the information that you asked us to bring back, we brought forth that as well tonight to discuss with you. Floor plan options and cost impact. This is one that's kind of gone by the wayside now. As you recall, we started with the auxiliary gym. We have kind of moved that out and prioritized getting some of the exterior ball fields. This was the plan that we brought to you last week. Our budget was, budgeted design was about 121,600 square feet. This was a little over 1,100 square feet over that budget, somewhere between 275 and 285 cost-wise. You asked for some additional information from this, and so what you will see now will be new information. We were asked to look at relocating the art. If you recall, art was here, and we had two CTE classrooms and flipped them here. This was kind of a blow up of that, along with the square footages that we put in here, and I think that information has been distributed to the board. We were also asked to look at option 3. This was one without the extended learning centers, going back to conventional double-loaded corridors, and then take that space and turn it into additional classrooms. Ashley, correct me if I'm wrong, but this added 6 additional classrooms, but it pushed us even further over, and we're somewhere about 655 to 685 over budget without the extended learning centers. So another option that I mentioned earlier was, what about going back to what the board originally approved programmatically? And that essentially was the early college, a general academic wing, with some extended learning centers in there, and then a STEAM wing that included the Career Center, the sciences, math, art, and that sort of thing. So we drew this. It still takes us a little bit over our square footage, about 2,500 square feet, but it's actually cheaper than eliminating the extended learning centers. And so, but we did want to see that, and I'm going to ask Ashley to walk through this, or do you want to go, do you want to go back and look at the one without the extended learning centers? Ashley, why don't you quickly just go through that? I'm sorry, I was just kind of speeding things up.
No, that's fine. So really everything kind of to the south here of the plan has not changed. What's changed is, here you can see we have the 2 pods and then the double loaded corridor for the CTE. And so if you go to this one, this is all the same. And then we basically took that extended instructional area and wrapped all the general classrooms, the EC classrooms, and the self-contained classrooms around that, much like the program that was originally established. Excuse me, forgot I had this on. And then the CTE wing would then be more of a STEAM wing. So you can see the green up in the corner, that's our science labs, the CTE program spaces, along with the art spaces. So how we kind of did this so we didn't end up way over program was some of the additional spaces that got added within our conversations within the CTE program were a additional smaller lab and a additional classroom. And what we actually did was take the labs and enlarge them so that they could function more flexibly and have classroom curriculum be taught within the lab space and have them be able to be more flexible for the future. So instead of trying to specialize each lab, we tried, and again, this is a quick iteration. We will definitely be able to adjust this as if we just, the goal is to move forward with it, but trying to make those be more flexible lab spaces that could function for any program, and then just have general CTE classrooms along with that.
So let me add, one of the reasons that this was kind of developed in the original program is when we first got started talking to the administration, to the folks in the high school, one of the things that we really laid out was what are the priorities going forward? And one of those priorities was to provide a facility that was going to be flexible enough that it would be a great school for the next 50, 60, 70 years. And that you could teach virtually any program that might come about in those years, and that you weren't restricted by the facility. And as we look at what we are building in other high schools across the country, this is exactly the concept that they are using for, I'd say, 95% of the high schools that we're building. They are building these collaborative areas. They are putting co-locating programs that work together well. Career education, pre-engineering, math, science, all those things want to kind of be together. And so you're doing these collaborative projects. You're able to work together to do those kind of projects. This particular layout is easier to supervise. We think it would be less costly to operate. It is a little less costly to build, even though we still got a little bit of a budget issue here. Ashley and I have, since I got this morning at what, 7? No, I got it at 12:34. 12:34 last night. That's what it was. So when I got this morning, we've been talking about ways that we can actually improve on this if this is the board's desire to move forward. And we think we can get it back down pretty closer to budget. And then going forward, we think it's going to give you greater flexibility in the future in how this building is used and how you teach in it. There are some things that we want to look at. I'll go ahead and point those out to you. We want to look at shifting these facilities in a little bit so we've got room to expand. One of the things that I want to do is give us some room here for this auditorium to kind of grow when that comes about. And by pushing that down, that would allow us to do that and still have the capability to add for future growth. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Before I ask for any input. I do want to take you through a couple of other things that you folks ask about. It dawned on me that you folks may not really understand how these extended instructional areas work because they are instructional spaces. This is a facility that I did in Columbia, South Carolina. It is kind of a career center, higher end education. It's called R2I2. It's won a number of national awards, but you can see we have classrooms that are very flexible. These are labs. I think in one of these labs in here, they actually teach solar energy, alternative energy, that sort of thing. One back up this direction, they teach food truck, entrepreneurs. And then they have a degree of different types of science programs and career center type programs. All that opens into this larger space. And a lot of times they have projects set up in there that is kind of cordoned off. These projects might stay up for a semester. They might stay up all year long. So these are actually like a classroom space, but as kids moving out, the projects stay. And here's another shot of that same area. This is another school we just finished up a year or so ago, very large school in Spartanburg. You can see what we tried to do is take corridors and still make them functional as collaborative spaces. A little larger school than what you folks wanted. This is about 600,000 square feet. This is one of the stairwells in here. Again, we put some touchdown spaces there in stairwells. This is a relatively poor district. This was a career center that we built for them. Again, this would kind of look similar to what your extended learning center would look like. You have classrooms over here that again open into this larger area so you can have collaborative projects and programs. Here's another shot of the same school. This is Buckhorn Elementary School in Wake County, North Carolina. Again, using these collaborative areas to be able to convert circulation space into instructional space. Another shot where you can actually see how it opens into the classrooms rather than doing the roll-up doors. In this particular case, they're doing foldable doors. In each one of these things that you've seen, you can see typically we're using glass pane doors so that you're able to supervise the activities that are going on out there, or you can have your door closed and it'd be just like having a classroom to a hall. This is Rico County, Tucker High School. Again, you can see kind of pulling off. A couple things I'll point out, and you saw it in R2I2. We had concrete floors that are like factory finished floors, or if you go in any high-end retail store, that's what you see these days. It's a way that we use to save money. One, you don't have to put tile down or carpet. You don't have to maintain it. You don't have to clean it. You can get a riding machine and go through it, and it looks like brand new. I had a high school that I did down in Georgia, and they wanted the extended learning centers in concrete, but they wanted some kind of floor finish in the classrooms. And so we were back there a couple years later. I normally meet with teachers and administrators several years after the building was open. And one of the questions, how can we improve? And one of the things they said, we wish we would have just put concrete in the classrooms because we're always moving around furniture and it messes up our floor, but yet the concrete stays beautiful. And so that was something that we have learned as we have gone through. And that's a way that we can save some money. Glen Allen High School in Henrico County, again, taking advantage. This is kind of the Shark Tank approach and incubator where kids are actually pitching their projects, they're developing their presentation skills, they're thinking through their projects before they begin. These are very popular in schools. So you ask us a question about synthetic turf, how much that costs, and how that would relate into looking at some other amenities on the outdoor fields. And so we have that information for you. The cost, the up cost for the turf is about $330,000. Yeah, remember, that's an estimate. It could be a little lower, it could be a little higher. We were asked about putting press boxes at each of the fields. This is a prefab box. They're about $93,000 each, times three would be about $277,000. We were asked about the cost of a field house. 4,000 square foot field house is between 1.2 and $1.3 million. And then the event parking that we talked about getting the variance from the county, that was about $170,000. So prior to the board making that decision, we did get some life cycle cost analysis on natural turf versus synthetic turf. And there is a big difference in that. This is a 10-year life cycle cost analysis. In order to turf a football field, it's about $200,000, about $535 for synthetic turf. So that gets you your differential of about $335. Maintenance on turf fields, about $25,000 a year. That doesn't include the capital investment in machines and things like that. Synthetic turf, it's about $5,000 a year. If you got a really nice AD and football coach, you might be able to get 40 to 50 events on that field. That's unlikely, especially in a very wet climate. On turf, you can have as many events as you want to on the field and you won't damage the turf. So it really, rain, shine, doesn't matter. Average cost per event is about $1,000, or on the synthetic turf, it's about $250. Scheduling possibilities, with the 40 to 50 events, about 6,000 hours, or with synthetic turf, about 30,000 hours. Again, where's Miss Davis? That creates a whole lot of other opportunities to use that field and not be worrying about damaging the field for a football game. Average cost per hour of use, $72 for the turf field, and about $20 an hour for synthetic turf. And that's some of the advantages and disadvantages. And some of these things have come from the people that are selling synthetic turf. I would point that out. Most of the football coaches and ADs are all asking for synthetic turf, especially in areas where they need multiple use fields and that sort of thing.
Is there a way, do you have copies of this?
You have a copy? Oh, you mean a hard copy?
Yeah.
No, sir, I
Or
didn't.
did you email it to me?
I will, but I'll copy it on this machine over here. It's on the desktop.
Okay. We just have a couple of board members who'd like to have a hard copy now, and I was gonna see if we could get Ms. Davis.
Okay.
Where you need.
What, I tell you what, got it right here. It's on the root drive and it's a CPS file, so it's fine.
And Amber, you can just make one for the 5 of them. I'm okay with that one for now. Thank you.
So I've thrown a lot at you and I got my reverse clicker ready to go back. So what questions might you have for myself or Ms. Dennis?
But the field house, there's got to be a cheaper option than that, right? I mean, that's $325 a square foot.
What is in
What
the
is
field
that?
house?
Sir?
For that amount, what is in the field house? I mean, what are we talking field house?
Okay. What would be in the field? Ashley, you want to answer?
Yeah, because we actually did ask that during our meeting with the AD and the athletic staff, because there was a, where is it? And that we said, well, let's figure out what it is so that we're planning for the right size.
Yeah.
So it's 4 locker rooms, 2 locker rooms, 1 locker room being the football locker room. So your big lockers in there. So, and I believe it's 60 to 100, and I can't remember exactly how many lockers are in there. Training room, restrooms for both of those locker rooms, laundry facilities for the equipment, because the request was we'd rather have that in the field house than in the building, and office space. So it ended up being right around 335 to 40, that 100.
So there would be some duplication of what we already have next to the gym or in the gymnasium next door to that, so that it would be accessible in the field house as well.
There is a little duplication, but still,
Yeah.
you would, if you didn't have those facilities within the gym, then all your other sports are going to be going out to the field house.
You might not have your football lockers within the building, but you're still going to have lockers.
Gotcha.
And one of the reasons that the cost is high is because it is plumbing and that sort of thing, very heavy. We have to use a lot of ceramic tile finishes and things like that, just for the nature of how the facility is used. There's some health standards that are involved in that.
Can you go back to, I guess we're now the 4 different options. One option used to be like option 12 and now it's number 3. I want to make sure I'm looking at the right ones. Basically, I want to see the one from last meeting. Yeah.
That's the one for the last meeting.
Okay. And that one, as it stands now, is already going to be, we're guesstimating 275, 285 over our budgeted amount.
Correct. Now, let me remember what I told you at the last meeting, is that this is schematics, and from here we move into design development. So there will be some minor changes as we move into a more detailed level of design. It would go up and down, and the commitment that we have made is that as we go with any of these designs, we're going to try to tighten it up and pull it back to budget.
And can you go to option number 4? The next one. That one. Is the one, option 3 is where we eliminated the extended learning space at future, and that's correct. 700,000. That's completely wrong. All right. Didn't, when we, and maybe Ms. Davis would remember better, but when they originally met and got feedback from all the departments as we got going, this was an original concept of putting that STEAM or STEM wing together. Was it science or CTE? Somebody, they didn't want that wing built together like that? Was there a lot of kickback, if I remember correctly?
Davis is still on.
Yeah, that was, and I asked Ms. Davis about that today. My recollection is that,
Sorry, we gonna work you tonight.
I was just trying to speak for you.
You're fine.
Wasn't there, during the initial round of development, when this was kind of our initial plan, as we looked at it, to have that STEM or STEAM wing, we seem to kind of recall a lot of kickback from either one department or the other, CTE or science. They didn't really like that layout.
There was some initially, but I think the original concept it was like 3 main pods, if I remember correctly. And I'm trying to go way back. And I think it wasn't, we didn't see anything put together like this. So it was kind of just like, here's your academic pod, here's your STEAM pod, here's the early college pod. And to be honest, I didn't understand the connection piece with it either. So I think this connects it a little more with that. They did not love the idea, some staff members, of the pods, but it was more, I think, of the separation piece. Does that make sense? I don't think, because I mean, this really connects everything. I think is more put together than kind of what the original concept seemed like.
So they didn't have an issue with the programming in the wings together.
No,
It was the fact that they were so
never heard
removed
anything
from
about
each
that.
other. Okay.
I'm not saying they didn't. I'm just saying I don't remember hearing anything about that at the time.
Let me add, and I should have said this when I originally presented it. This is a combination of the original program that was done a year ago and a lot of the comments that we have received from the staff. So this is kind of a combined option. The fundamental programming aspect of the STEAM concept and the academic wing concept and the early college concept is true. And we had kind of gotten away from that in the others, but this kind of marries that back up.
It seems like science is like out in no man's land though, compared to the other gen ed classes.
Well,
Peers would be.
Well, let me say this. Ms. Dennis was very clear with me this morning at 7:30 or something like that. I hadn't even had my coffee yet. So this is a rough depiction. And so if this is the pleasure of the board, then what we want to do is go back and refine this And so when we bring back a design development program, or even over the next week, get a more refined version of this, then we would like to do that. What we're trying to do here is show you a proof of concept, so to speak, and tell you that, you know, what the advantages and disadvantages are. Obviously, one of the disadvantages is I'm 2,000 square feet over where I need to be, but we believe we can get most of that back out by tightening it up. Ashley said that there's some issues around toilets and things like that that she needs to work with. A couple of things that I want to look at is how we can maybe push out the middle a little bit here and get some more room, and then narrow this down a little bit. And I think we can do that, which would give us more functional collaborative spaces and maybe save us a little bit of money on exterior walls. And so those are the kind of things that we would like to explore a little bit more, but we frankly just didn't have time in one day to, you know, more fully refine it. But this was a proof of concept for us.
Doesn't look like there's a lot of room to expand either with this one. Not, you know, with hallways attaching or whatnot. Unless I guess you come out that center corridor, but you were saying you were gonna shift the other pod over. too.
Well, a couple things. Again, we wanted to look at doing that, and then we wanted to shift this over. If you recall, we
Yeah.
had some space here for growth, but if we shifted this over and kind of move this away back here, then this is going to give this whole area up here for future growth,
Even the auditorium, there'll still be room.
and including the auditorium. So, but Ashley just didn't have time. I mean, you know, we wanted to get something for you tonight. I didn't want to disappoint you. And I think this is important enough for the board to at least give it consideration before we move on.
Sorry, I'm gonna jump around back to the synthetic turf. You were talking about equipment costs and maintenance and et cetera, et cetera. What equipment other than what we're already using to cut our grass and things here would we be needing to acquire with the new one? Because I can't really see that being an increased expense on equipment because we already have it. We have to do it now. We've got to cut all this grass.
It's really a function of the labor, the fertilizer, the sod repair, the water that you're going to use to irrigate the fields. I'm sorry. Striping, that sort of thing. But the biggest use is not just the maintenance, it's having a multiple use field for a lot of different things that you can do on it. And
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but like what we got our own soccer field with this new concept. We've got our own baseball, softball field. We got a football field that other than football and, well, we cross use it now with baseball and soccer because we just don't have anything else. What else is our fields getting used for that maybe I'm not, and graduation, obviously, is a big one.
well, band practice, of course, would be done on this field. I mean, if you're going to practice, you might as well practice on the field you're going to be performing on.
They need 20 yards worth.
Yeah, football practice, you can do your practice on this field as opposed to a practice field. You know, any other activities that you would want to have on there. May want to do a rodeo. I don't know. And I'm not trying to say on the concept either way.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to
right.
gauge it because I mean,
Right.
it's quite clear. I think our athletics
And-
department would
and-
like to have
and-
that, but 300,000 is 300,000.
Yeah, let me say this about this. This is not a decision the board needs to make tonight. You have plenty of time to make this decision. You got 4 or 5 months. And frankly, I would like to get the site bids in my hand before we make too many really hard decisions on building and on amenities in the play fields. Whether we put these press boxes on here, I can do that 30 days before I bid the project. And I can even do that later. That's the beauty about design, Bill. We can be very flexible when we do this. Field house is something that we would need to know about. Obviously, that's a big enough number that we would have to redirect funds from some other things in order to be able to do a field house.
I mean, at today's standards, we can't build a field house like we have here. I mean, that's probably $80,000, I guess, in today's dollars.
You can.
Okay, we can.
That's the problem. If we build it, we got all kind of rules and regulations and things that have to be approved, but a booster club could build it. And, you know, as long as your building inspector lets you build it, then you could do it, but we cannot.
Okay.
Because we have to meet a lot of ADA codes and that sort of thing. Now, one of the conversations that we've had is looking at some fundraising events. And we don't have the site plan here tonight, but we talked about doing some bricks and name bricks and that sort of thing. That may be something that you can consider. The other is, if you folks will recall, last year, the General Assembly had some funds that they were considering pushing out to the school districts. That kind of got put on hold during the budgeting process with COVID. I honestly believe there's such a need in the K-12 education in the state of North Carolina. We're either going to see something coming back through the General Assembly's annual budgeting, or there is going to be some sort of statewide bond referendum coming to the table in 2022. And so I believe there's some more state money that would be coming down, that if it's timely enough, we may be able to apply some of those funds to supplementing some of the cuts that we had to make on this project to get it down to the 10 cents cap that we had. Not promising that, but you know, I do have a high degree of confidence that the General Assembly is going to do something for K-12 education. If not, we'll vote them out, get some more in there.
So when you're saying we can worry about this later, you'll just bid it, you could go ahead and bid it with the event parking and all that, so we would know what that cost would be.
We can take that as alternates, yes, sir. And I have to get a variance anyway, and so we can take those as alternates. One of the things that I thought about doing is letting that actually be the laydown area where we put all of our equipment. So what we would do is come in and heavily stone that area. And so if anything else, it would be a stone base, even if let's say we couldn't afford to do it. But most of that would just be refreshing that stone base and then paving it. So that might save some money in that regard.
Back to the question from last meeting, time-wise, because time and money are two things we have zero extra of. What are you looking for? We understand synthetic turf, but that can wait.
Yeah, I can wait.
We can get it as an ad alternate so that it's there if we can afford it. If not, it wasn't a big deal. What are you needing from us tonight? Because we're already a week past our 1 week deadline because of the weather. So,
Well, that's a great question. And what I need from the board tonight is a general direction to march off into. I think we've kind of put the site to bed. We've got a request in to Mr. Bowman. We met with Mr. Bowman. He has asked us to follow the policy or the procedure they have set up. They request a variance. We're going to get in front of the commission and request that, and that is in the works right now with our civil engineer. So I'm going to kind of put the site to the side. And in my mind, the most critical path activity we have is get grading, to get started on grading. We intend on doing and have always intended on doing an early grading package while the design is being completed. So if I can get my grading started this summer, I'm happy. That buys me a little extra time on the building. The other thing that I mentioned to you a week or so ago, week and a half ago, is that I want to get this right. You know, right now, I'd rather take a little extra time up front and get this right, because this is a long time decision for this county rather than try to rush something. And if I can get my site work going, I got a little extra time on the bill. But what I would like to have from the board tonight is a general direction in which you want us to go. And if it's one of the earlier concepts, or if it is the new is this the new concept? Yep, the new concept that we brought forward, then tell us, and then we will more fully refine that and, either bring you something back, or we will give the information to Dr. Farrell and he can distribute it to the board, or we could do a Zoom meeting, and not have to call you folks back if you wanted to see kind of a more refined version of this. But that's kind of what I would like to get here tonight.
Good point. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You can run all copy, ma'am. You run.
There, I will tell you, I'm not a fan of this for a lot of different reasons. You do get a few extra classrooms here, but I think as you learn about these collaborative centers and these extended instructional things, it's going to be a real key to an instructional program going forward. I mean, it is a game changer in instruction for students.
That one's done anyway, it's 700,000.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody here
can all
Right.
like that one, right?
And, this is not a bad plan. There are some issues with it, but one of the things that I do believe is this it's going to create some inflexibility going forward. And so as some of these programs change, you're going to have some expensive retrofits in order to convert those spaces to something else. And careers change, jobs go away, new jobs are created. And one of the things that I want to try to do is provide for that flexibility as you're going forward. I just believe that's very important long term. It might not be for today, but 10 years from now, I think it will be very important for you. This, I also think, will be a little more expensive to supervise than this space. And it will certainly be a little more claustrophobic. The other is in the other plan that we brought last week, really a lot of your CTE teachers wouldn't have the benefit of these extended instructional areas. And that will be where these collaborative projects take place between the different disciplines.
Don't they already have those collaborative learning spaces in their labs?
Only for the students in that lab. You may have projects that are working for different folks. And the other, once you set up a CTE lab with welding, I'll use welding as an example, something I know about. I used to be a welder. You set those machines up and the electrical wiring and that sort of thing. That's really all you can do in that space. This space down here is highly flexible space. If you want to build robots out there, you could build robots out. If you want to get that out and put a boat in there and learn the fiberglass boats and things, you can do that. These doors here are big open doors. You can bring machinery in there. It's going to be a high-end space that you can do a lot of different things that you just could not do inside the confines of a 12 or 1,400 square foot lab. One of the things that this design did was it increased those lab spaces to, I believe, 1,800 square feet. So we've grown them in size, again, to create more flexibility. I don't know if that's the right number. Maybe it's 17, 1650. I don't know. We need to more fully refine that. But what this does do is provide a lot more flexibility in the individual spaces as well as the overall wing itself.
And I'll clarify that. We have some at 1,200 and the rest at 1,800, just depending on the program. So we didn't make the computer focused one the giant one. It's more the hands-on programs for those larger labs.
And what does that do to the general education classroom sizes?
So those are the exact same.
They are the exact same.
So in any of the plans that we go with, currently with that budget that you're showing, is that at, on this option 4, we use that for example, because that's what you have up. For the add-on, that's a classroom for every teacher we have right now. And additional classrooms for growth?
Well, right now, we're building for 650,
600,
600.
but truly by DPI standards for a 4x4 block, high school, it would hold between 675 and 690. That's just kind of how they do their capacity on schools, so.
You didn't answer my question.
I didn't hear most of it. Sorry. I apologize.
So in any of these plans, there will be enough classrooms and lab space for every teacher that we have today?
Depends on how it's used. And I'm not being evasive, but for example, if you have a teacher that has 2 classrooms assigned to them, right now we're assigning 1 and then we'll have a flex classroom. So rather than having a lab with a separate classroom, what we're doing is enlarging the lab so that we can have a lab in part of it and a classroom in part. That's the reason that we went up in square footage on those lab spaces. And as opposed to having, that way you've got an occupied room for that period during the day, as opposed to having a lab and a classroom for 1 teacher. And then what happens is you either got an empty lab or an empty classroom while you're not using it. And so we're combining those in what we call learning labs, where classrooms are in a portion of the space, and then you have the equipment or lab at the back.
So will there be enough of those rooms for every teacher?
Yes, sir. Now, if you start doubling up a lot of teachers, and then they're going to be, what we look at is not necessarily the teachers, but the students. How many student classes are you teaching? How many periods a day? And so we design classrooms around students. What I'm not doing is designing, unless you want me to, I'm happy to do it if you want me to. We don't design spaces around teachers that don't have a class, so to speak. That, was I clear, or did I answer that?
So I'll slightly clarify that, and I'll use the agriculture program as an example, because I know that there's 2 teachers, and we adjusted CTE. So we now have a very large lab, whereas before we had a smaller lab. We have a very large lab that could function as a classroom space and a lab space, and then we have a ag classroom. So those 2 people have 2 places that they could either teach classroom, or 1 could teach lab, or the lab is big enough that it could be combined because it's the larger lab. So it's not ownership so much as functionality. Does that make sense?
And what I would also add, in the next phase of design, you will see desk chairs and how you will be able to use these spaces. And I think the staff, they will also have the opportunity to see how these classrooms lay out and how many desks you can get into them, what the work areas are, where the teacher might be located, and that sort of thing. So as we talk about learning labs, I think that will start making a lot more sense at that point in time.
Let me ask my question a different way to see if I get the same answer.
Depends on the answer you want. If you tell me the answer you want, I might can help you.
I've already asked you that twice. Does that concept talk about teachers floating from classroom to classroom?
No, not so much. Not like a teacher on a cart. But again, if they're in the CTE program, there might be a chance.
Let's use an English teacher.
No. The number of classrooms did not change. They stayed at 12, which was the from our original meeting. And so it's more where there's that flexible, and I don't want to get confused between the extended instructional area and the lab.
Yeah.
When I say flexible labs for this particular conversation, that's the more rectangular space that is being used for equipment and classroom space.
Okay. I was interpreting a little bit, you were leading down the area of college days when a professor walked out of his office into a classroom and taught and left.
No, we're not. What we are talking about doing is, rather than having a instructor with two separate rooms, we are combining that. And then rather than having two classrooms, we would give a room between two instructors with the same kind of program. Plus they would have classrooms within their labs. And then and let's just use an ag classroom as an example. Let's say 10 years from now, you only have enough interest in one ag classroom and you want to convert that other lab to another program, you'll have the space in order to do that. 1,800 square feet is a pretty large space. And so it provides that flexibility to do a lot of different kinds of programs.
If I may, I think I understand. So if Mr. Overton and I are the ag teachers, since that was the example Ashley used, you're going to give us together an 1,800 square foot lab / classroom and not each. No,
Mm.
you're going to give us together, you're going to give us an,
No wonder I was confused.
you're going to give us an
I
eight,
need a sidebar.
Yeah. Together as ag teachers, you're going to give us an 1,800 square foot lab and classroom space and a classroom space. So some days it might be that Mr. Overton is teaching in the 1,800 square foot space, lab or classroom, and I'm teaching in the smaller or in the classroom without the lab. And then the next day it could be the same. And then the third day we could do a lesson together with both of our classes in the larger space using the classroom space and the lab. So I don't have, as an ag teacher, one of the ag teachers, I might not have a dedicated lab and classroom, but there's space for us to teach separately and a space for us to teach together. And that's what you mean, I think, when you say it's about functionality and not ownership. One of the things that educators do, I've been one a long time, we own our space, right? I mean, it's my classroom, I want my name on the door, that kind of thing. And it's hard for people to kind of get away from that. But
And I use ag and, I'm not picking on them, but the reason I use that is because that was a particular one where I knew there was two teachers.
Yeah.
And in the flip back a few slides, design, we had two classrooms and a smaller lab.
in a smaller lab.
And so one way we were able to provide the kind of larger flexible labs and not make that bottom number go way out of the ballpark was, let's provide the bigger lab that really we can have that flexibility and still teach in, and then, but still provide a classroom. It wasn't take all the classrooms away either.
Next question. So some of the teacher concerns that came from the CTE teachers that was emailed to us was looking at the layout, the lay of the land, is how they would be able to get in and out, equipment in and out, deliveries in and out of their lab space. Is that obtainable?
It may be difficult for you to see. This is a rolling garage
I'm
door.
not talking about that. I'm talking about the physical layout. of
So
get-
In
getting
this
it-
particular presentation, we don't have the site plan, and again, it's
I
going,
guess-
it's
yeah, I
going
guess-
into the details. We weren't quite there, and we've kind of talked about that a little bit, where we showed the greenhouse, but we knew we were crossing traffic kind of thing. Like, we haven't gotten to all of the things fully worked through, but there was that pathway kind of down the middle
Wide sidewalk.
here, and that would be to be able to pull, either dolly in, forklift in. I'm not saying let's back an 18-wheeler up to every roll-up door, but be able to get deliveries into those spaces way more easily than you would if it was just, drop it here. And we were trying to accommodate some smaller things moving in. You probably could pull a truck up, but not an 18-wheeler up.
Yeah, that's the kind of things that do come in the next phase of design.
You made mention, and I'm gonna go back to my greenhouse. You made mention that the field house is something you would need to know now. And I know we've had discussions about the greenhouse will be coming the next phase into details. But a structure that big, I just want to make sure that we're on the forefront, you're on the forefront of that being placed on the property too.
Right, yeah. and that does-
Accessible to all. I mean, if we go with a concept like this, there's no reason that science classes can't get in there and collaboratively teach with it as well with an ag teacher with botany or biotechnology or.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things about.
And also, if you build it with this money, you're not building it with federal money strictly from CTE.
Well, let me say first is this is near and dear to my heart. I have a degree in botany. So believe me, I am pro plants. My only concern about the location of the greenhouse, how big it is, how much in the way of utilities that we have to provide for it, and the overall cost. You know, for example, Dr. Farrell asked us to take a look at the facility up in Currituck. You know, that's a $50,000 greenhouse, but that's, you know, parts come in a box. It's another $250,000 to provide all the utilities and concrete and access and that sort of thing, you know, for the $50,000 greenhouse. And, you know, a $50,000 greenhouse is not that big of a greenhouse. And so if we're going to make the investment, I want to make sure that it's functional. And so if we can figure out a way to bring that field house closer to the actual classroom space, I'd much rather do that. If we can figure out how to incorporate some of the structure of the building and lessen the cost of the infrastructure that it takes for the greenhouse, we want to do that. But that's something that we just need to noodle on a little bit and come up with some solutions to do that. And if I can save a couple $100,000, I'd like to do that. I just finished a greenhouse, and I think I told you folks about this a week or so ago. You know, it wasn't that big a greenhouse, and by the time it was all said and done, it was over $500,000 investment. Plus, we had to put in a new gas service and a new electrical service to provide gas for it. It actually used more gas than the whole building did. In this particular case, it was natural gas. But they were expecting to have 365-year growing in there at, you know, very humid temperatures. So we need to understand the program a little better before we kind of settle in on what a greenhouse looks like. And we want to make it accessible and we want to make it functional. But we're not quite there in this yet. That's the next phase or so of design.
That sounds like one of the things we could possibly build cheaper ourselves, like the field house.
Well, Atlas will probably give us a quote for about 80,000 for a 30 by 96 greenhouse.
Yeah.
So all we have to do is hook the utilities up to it.
There are a lot of aspects of it, and
That's a turnkey greenhouse ready to go.
let's buy it. Let's buy it. I mean, we need to know the utilities, and everybody's got different needs. You know, a greenhouse that I'm thinking about might not be the greenhouse that someone else is thinking about.
Exactly. There's lots of variations.
Yeah. And we've committed to provide a greenhouse within this budget. It's just a matter of where it's going to be located and how big it's going to be and, you know, what the specs are around that greenhouse.
What kind of budget do we have? So in that 500, 600,000 over budget, the greenhouse is in that
Well,
projection? Or that's just the square footage of the brick and mortar?
yeah, keep in mind, if you go back to the budget that we're working from, kind of our overall 45,
Yeah.
256,000, I think is the number, 256, 254. It's within that overall budget.
Okay.
And again, I keep bringing this up. A big issue I have is getting the site cost in. And, you know, we could pick up some money on the site cost that helps us. Next year, we might get some money from the state that might help us. And You know, some of the $20 million we had to cut out of this project, some of that may reappear and really truly make this the project that Camden County deserves. Right now, we're working with a cap that's imposed on us, which is a 10 cents cap. But you folks will see all the numbers as we go along, and every penny that we can get, we will try to squeeze it as hard as we can.
Ms. Stevens, do you feel like you got enough space for all your teachers? It looks like you're losing maybe a couple classrooms based on what you have now.
I might could use one, but I needed to look at it more to see. It looked like you kind of changed it a little bit, the office area. That was what I was looking at.
Oh, yeah, we're still working through that. There is some slight change, but we're not talking about that yet because we need to present that to you in a more formal way.
Right.
This was just the model that I grabbed off the server and started breaking last night. So, but classroom wise, it's the same as what.
It was just the one, the storage room area, looked like it was moved to the inside the office or something.
Is it this little pink L shape or the?
And that's what
Yeah.
I was wondering if it was in that, it was in that little area.
It wasn't shaded in pink on the.
Oh, no, it was not. It was shaded as a classroom, but it was actually, should have
Yeah,
been.
she's talking about the L shape.
Yeah, that one was your storage room.
Okay.
And it was shaded as a classroom, and so I kind of did that for clarity.
Okay.
But I probably.
It should have been pink all the way.
Yeah, I confused everybody.
Okay,
I
that's good,
apologize.
okay.
And so,
Okay, I'm good then.
Yeah.
I thought I had lost one room, but I see that.
No, I actually truly gave it to you.
I'll take another one, there you go.
and so let me say, if this is the direction the board wants us to go in, our next thing is to take a couple more days and we'll fully refine this. I'm not asking you to buy this design tonight. I'm asking you to tell us if this is the direction you want us to go in. If it is, give us a couple days to more fully refine it. We want to make sure staff is happy. And then some point in time, we can either have a meeting if necessary, or, Zoom meeting and run this back by you. We will try to give it to you in time to look at. If you want to go back and talk about some of the others, we can do that as well. There's a lot of different components, but to me is educational component. And if you folks remember what I told you the very first time I met you, if you're building a new school, whatever kind of school that is, and if you don't educate kids better in a new facility than you did the old facility, you wasted your money. And so what we're trying to do here is give you that ability to unshackle yourself from the walls and that sort of thing, and you can really take advantage of flexibility in your instructional program.
That collab space in the gym area in this option, I mean, that looks like that could be a very busy area when, every kid having to go to, you get basically your whole entire high school student population that's in gen ed.
Would be right in the middle.
It's just, yes, it's traversing through that, when some,
Which space are you referring to?
the collaborative area where it's just one giant with the entire gen ed population
In the yellow.
in the yellow.
Down that whole big long hall.
So,
Well, as I mentioned, one of the things that Ashley and I have been talking about today is moving some of these classrooms out and shortening and fattening a little bit, but not growing space. And we've done that in a lot of other buildings. This is a proof of concept. This is not a schematic I'm asking you to approve.
I'm gonna be honest, looking at all these, personally, I still like the bones of option 2 better, like the price tag better. It looks like it's more easily expandable. So if we did get more money, we could easily add a couple classrooms or even extend the CTE wing. Because it's not, it's already shrunk down and tighter, so there's more room to go out.
Yeah, well, that's
CTE.
one of the things
Yeah, you went out
Ashley,
further here, so.
yeah, she didn't have time to do was
Yeah.
to show how we would expand this. And that's obviously something that we would bring you back.
And then plus it's a little bit more separation in those collaborative areas where you won't have the entire student body flowing in there at one time. Plus science is with the rest of gen ed. where I think it should be. But
Which option are you talking about?
two.
I think this would be two.
Like I said, the price tag too is,
Trying to-
looks better.
Hard for me to keep them straight as well. And then this would be four. I think we've kind of ruled out three.
What is just your off the cuff, Ms. Dennis, of, and Mr. Ott also, of expansion from that standpoint? I know I'm
On this one.
not gonna hold you to it, yeah, but just,
Thanks. No, I think that Rick and I kind of talked it through, and, you know, I apologize for not being able to get everything on paper for you, because I know I'm a visual person, so, you know, bear with me as we kind of move things, but we're talking about taking this CTE wing and kind of dragging it down, because now we have a pretty big space between those two. I think we have some options to either utilize the space out to the back of the school or the student entrance of the school to be expansion, and that would probably require a corridor or something like that. Or we've talked about maybe even connecting these with some expansion. So we're at such a rough place right now to, you know, like, I think there's a lot of good points that have been brought up about this that could help it refine it better. And in that, help us really show you where that expansion could be.
Well, there's one disadvantage that I don't like about either option four or option two. And that is, this is a very busy space. And if we were to pull this in and I can fit a corridor in between here and here, now I can have traffic going this way and I can have traffic going this way, and it kind of frees up a lot of space. So it provides a little more free flow of students and not add such a crowded area in this space.
I think you just said exactly what I was thinking as far as.
I heard it. I got it.
I was trying to send it to you. You know, the concept, merging the concept with what you have tonight. You know, there's 1, 2, 3, and I know it's a concept, but there's 3, 7, 8 classrooms on the conceptual design with a demo lab in the early college. And I mean, just rearranging those spaces and, like you said, kind of building down the spine of the school, and having some cross traffic means of opening things up and allowing traffic to flow in more in one direction, keeping some of the extended instructional areas still. I like this concept merged with the original.
Where we started?
Yeah, that's what you told me. So that's just my thoughts.
And again, where we want to do is end up as good as we can for our budget. And that's what a schematic is. It's a process of getting there. And this would be a starting place, if this is the way you wanted us to go, to kind of start looking at some of those advantages and disadvantages. I saw it at 7:30 this morning. I think Dr. Farrell may have saw it, you know, sometime later in the morning, and you folks are just now seeing it. So obviously it's something fresh. You know, we kind of threw it in because I felt like we had made so much kind of progress in other areas, but I really wanted to kind of bring you back to where we started with the program, where we've already gotten a lot of feedback from staff, and kind of show you that and build on that. So.
What do you guys think? Our little principals.
And they really just got to see it.
I think there's pros and cons to 2 and 4. I like different things about them. You know, I like for option 4 that both their STEM pod and the main academic pod both have access to an extended learning area. My science people were actually the people who were most probably passionate about the extended learning areas. Because there's so much that they want to do and, you know, can do, but they need more space. So I think that, you know, and I like I said, I think the more space you have, the better in a high school. I mean, for kids to work and be able to do things with that. For some reason, I have a little more affinity for option 2. I don't know why. It's just because I've looked at it more. I honestly can't say that, I'm sold on either one. Because I like, the concept of both. I do kind of like the concept of like, with she's example of the ag, having the lab classroom and the classroom. I think that, provides more space and flexibility. Because one thing I've seen in CTE, just being here for the 3 years, is we have changed programs. It depends on kind of what students are interested in, because that's what we're trying to provide is, what has that much high interest. So I really like that part of option 4. So I'm gonna kind of go with like what Dr. Banks said, and I think maybe
It's almost like it's,
combination of, not make it drive any harder, but, a little bit of both, because I think there's really good things in both of them. As far as science being in the STEAM or the main academic lab, I don't know that that's a big deal either way. My science teachers may be yelling at me right now on that thing, saying, no, we want to be one way or the other. I really don't know how they feel about that, so.
They want to make a lot of noise.
They do, and that's the thing with them being there, it does give them some more options for that, so I definitely see some pros for that,
Yeah,
so.
one of the advantages about having science over here, other than the collaborative, they're gonna have a lot more accessibility, a lot more outdoor space, and they can make a lot more noise, and nobody's gonna complain.
Yeah, and the outdoor space is huge for them. They've come to me several times about, are they gonna be able to go like out,
That's a lot of
back
outdoor
doors, do
space
this,
to me.
are they gonna have that, and things like that, so.
What do you need
that is a good point.
into the future classrooms?
So if I'm hearing Dr. Banks correctly, what you would like to see is how we would pull these two together and maybe tie them together.
almost as if you would take the CTE wing and flip it 90 degrees, but I mean, and I know that's not a perfect scenario because you're gonna eliminate some of your outdoor access from some of those classrooms, but like health sciences, I don't think they really need an outdoor facility. Art does for sure. But yeah, essentially.
Well, let me just
And
quickly.
that would also take you back to, I mean, I'm not trying to get ahead of actually, but like having that expandable corner really.
You're notching it.
And that is really something that was one of the first things, the two things was the student traffic, and the other is pushing this over and really giving us this whole corner here for expansion with the auditorium and another classroom wing that kind of married around this area right here. But one of the points that I want to make to you, Dr. Banks, this particular facility right here, this wall right here is actually the back wall to, this is a 2-story building. And inside what's taking place in this lab is adjacent to a conference center. There are hundreds of people every day that are coming in and looking at the program that these students are working on. They set up a lot of really neat projects out there. Also, on the back side of this wall is the district admin building. And there are holes punched in there. And so they are looking down into the instructional program, into the project area. This is kind of cut away so they can actually see the projects that are going on. Because at some point as in a life of administrator, you might forget what it's like to be a student and what you're really there all for. And so we wanted to bring that proximity to it. By putting things down the hall like you just suggested, we could put some viewing windows and that sort of thing. So as projects are going, people are visiting the school, the public's in there, they can kind of see those kind of activities that are taking place, even if it's after hours. Show off the good things that are happening in Camden County. Other thoughts, questions? I don't see any tar buckets yet. Keep them eyes open, Ashley.
Are we talking about just shifting that wing over, or you're talking about adding like a secondary
She's got to
connector?
get this thing back and, I mean.
Well, and that leads me back to my original statement, of time and money we don't have a lot of.
No,
Every
no,
time
no,
we
no,
have to
no.
redo a drawing,
That's
She's
what,
good at what she does. She doesn't do it for free because it's beneficial.
yeah,
Well,
that's what-
actually-
that's what,
actually she is.
That's what they,
Actually get it done.
that's what they've said though. I mean, this is to go in a direction. It's not to say this is what we're signing off on.
No, I understand. That's why I just want to make sure we're, because we went from, we have the pods to option 2 now. Then it came back to 3, and then this morning at 1 in the morning, she's up doing option 4. I mean, we're,
So if you had to pick right now, what do you pick? The bones of,
I mean,
or if we're gonna give them a direction tonight.
I like the concept of 4, but with modifications.
And that's obviously the way we presented it as a
I
concept
like 2.
that we need to more
Well, I
fully
mean,
develop.
what,
I
And
like to too.
That's why I'm at.
You've done a really good job and we appreciate your patience. We really do.
And do not think that we are kind of jesting. I was up late, but it was just because I was out of town, and so I came back and I started working on it. But this is what we do. This is not, I mean, don't feel like you're like overworking us to get to where we need.
trust me, I was just putting that out as a point of
Yeah.
your time, time by architects ain't cheap. But no, I mean, you gotta work till 1 in the morning, you gotta work till 1 in the morning. It is what it is.
and if
I
I
already
can,
gave my feet a
It's
ring.
nothing
It's over,
personal. It's not,
guys.
yeah, I'm not like a horrible person,
No
but
matter how
it's
many
what we
hours
gotta do
it
to get
takes.
the job done, so we gotta get the job done.
and let
I'm
me,
just-
let me clarify something on like option 4 versus option 2. I mean, option 4 and option 2 are very similar. I mean, all I'm talking about is where option 2 has the future classrooms is basically extending that future classroom space. And then you've got that top pod or whatever you want to call it there, that's where you would still have future growth or expansion. I mean,
You're
it's,
absolutely correct. They are close in what they are. This is providing you a little more flexibility in how those spaces will be used in the future. And it's probably going to be a little easier to supervise all of the spaces as opposed to option 2. But they are very close in nature. But I did want to bring this back to you as an option to look at.
Another 300,000 over budget too.
Well, we're,
It's just-
until I get to design development, I'm not gonna know exactly the square footage that we're working towards. And obviously, we can worry about a little bit of square footage, but we just can't keep adding on budget overages and budget overs. We're gonna have to get that rectified at design development. We're gonna have to be back to our budget.
So, Rick,
Yes, sir.
one of the things that I've heard from speaking to each of the board members is about the time and the money. And it sounds like Ashley has sort of addressed the money issue, but what about the time? Because one of the things that they heard from you, I think, at the last board meeting was, let's get moving, is because, you didn't want to delay because you want to be moving dirt, I think was the terminology in July. Is taking the 2 to 3, taking the couple of weeks or a week or whatever it's going to take to do this?
The building design is somewhat separate. It is kind of tied together, but it is somewhat separated. We are going to do an early site package regardless. We were always going to do that. We fully intend on being out there grading this summer. We can afford another week or 2 to get this schematic right and make sure everybody's happy, including the staff, including the board, including the people that are paying for it. If we need to take 2 weeks, we'll take 2 weeks. Now, can I give you a month? That would be pushing it. But I can certainly afford another 2 weeks to get it right. And I want to get it right. But I feel like unless I hear something from this board tonight, we've kind of resolved our site issues, and my civil engineer can get turned loose to get that going.
I think the only thing we're down to at this point is the layout. The site is-
but it's not perfected yet. I mean,
Yeah, it's not gonna be perfect until we get this finalized either, because you kind of gotta know, what you have to put where to support what, but
Well, I guess I would ask Ashley, if we want to more fully refine this with some of the things we've talked about, when do you think you could have something back that we could send to the board electronically?
Within that 1 to 2 weeks, I think is totally doable. I'd like to try to do it as fast as we can, but,
So I heard a week. So,
It's 2 weeks of spring break, ain't nothing gonna happen. Or it's all gonna be video conference and probably everybody sitting.
It's not even 2 weeks to spring break, actually.
actually, yeah.
And I
Let
want
me
the
figure out when I go on
teachers,
spring break.
Let's be
and
clear
then I'll
about
give it to
that.
you right before that.
That's what everybody here's gonna be somewhere and then they can be here.
yeah, but I want the staff to be able to see it and give input and all on it too, just not.
well, I think this is important to the community. And, I know Ashley, she's lived up to every deadline she's made so far. And, if we can get you something next week, I think next week, everybody's going to still be here.
Yes.
And so if we got you something next week, kind of the option 6, which is kind of a married version of that, or maybe a cohabitation version, whatever your choice is these days. We give you something to look at, and then I think that would, we would flushed out whether it's 2 or 4 or 4.5. I did not come here tonight expecting the board to give me a hard approval on a schematic design, because after looking at this, I at least see some more potential for improving on the design. And that's when I looked at it this morning, when I talked to Dr. Farrell, that was my comment. I see ways that we can improve over what we've already shown you. And so that's what I'm trying to get to. But we are happy to do any of these that you folks would like.
So it sounds like to me, back to the drawing board on a hybrid option 4.
We're back on the drawing board, but we're not starting over.
Right.
And so,
That's what a hybrid option 4.
right, we're making progress. In my opinion, positive progress.
6.5 or 4.2, we don't know yet.
So if I may be clear as the guy who's going to plan this, so you're talking about a weekish, maybe a little more, getting this. And when you say getting it to the board and maybe having a Zoom meeting, are you talking about a Zoom board meeting, or are you talking about getting it to them and then individualizing questions, or how? Tell me where.
Well, I obviously think staff needs to have more than 30 seconds to 30 minutes to look at it. So they need to have an opportunity to provide feedback. And I will leave that up to the board on whether you would like to do a board meeting. If you want us to come up here, we will do that. If you want to do a virtual meeting, we're happy to do that.
We have a board meeting the week we return from spring break. Is that right, Anita?
The 15th is our next scheduled board meeting.
Yeah, I don't know what that feels like for you, waiting until then or not. I'm not, and certainly we want to get it to them long before then, but as far as a decision,
It's 22 days.
might be a little long.
It's 3 weeks.
Well,
Well, spring
let
break
me
is
get it in your
close
hands.
everything.
And then you look at it, and then let's decide if you need the extra time. And if we can go ahead and make a decision sooner, we'll take it.
Okay.
If we can get a consensus from everyone, that allows us to go ahead and start doing what we need to do. And one of the things that I've heard right now is this and this, we pretty much got settled. And so, Ashley's engineers can go ahead and start looking at these pieces and parts. And right now, we're focusing on the classroom pods and where they're at and how they tie together.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you for all your hard
Thank you
work.
very much.
Almost made it. Folks, we appreciate your time. We will work very hard. We will get you something back to look at, and, really ask good questions, because your feedback is making this a better design. It really is, and we appreciate that. Ashley, anything?
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Safe
Thank you.
travels.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
All right, Dr. Farrell. CCHS graduation options.
So you all had, we talked about the different options at the last meeting for end of year events, particularly focused on graduation. And we talked about surveying students and senior families and parents. And what both principals have done is surveyed. One of the choices, the number one choice for both schools, from the seniors and their parents who took the survey, was a traditional ceremony with no limit on tickets. The second choice for parents and students who were surveyed for both schools was a traditional ceremony with limited tickets. What that looks like for Camden County High School, and Amber, you and Gwen, feel free to jump in if I say anything that's
Yeah.
wrong, but what that looks like for Camden County High School is about 5 tickets per student.
Yes, sir, it may actually be a little more because they just increased the outside capacity to 50%. So that changes, it was 30% until Friday at 5 PM. It's gonna be 50%, so that may actually now increase. I didn't get a chance, I'm sorry to call
Okay.
you today about that, with that. So we may be able to increase that by, it'll probably end up being like 1 ticket, maybe 2, depending on, so looking at maybe 6 tickets,
Okay.
per graduate, maybe 7 if we're lucky, you know, with that. So yes, so that's kind of what we're looking at now, because it goes to 650 is our capacity with the 50%.
And then for Camden Early College, that would be approximately 8 tickets, right, Ms. Stevens? And so then from there, the next choice down was individual ceremonies at Camden County High School and at Early College for option 3. And then Camden County High School had a 4th option, which was to split the students alphabetically into 2 ceremonies, and that came in 4th place. So we looked at having some conversation, or I had some conversation with both Ms. Davis and Ms. Stevens, and we are not comfortable necessarily violating the orders. And so the number one choice, the traditional ceremony with no limits to tickets, we really weren't comfortable saying, hey, let's do that. But we felt like with 5 or 6 tickets and 8 tickets, doing a traditional ceremony on the field, with the understanding, of course, that if we have inclement weather, that's going to reduce the number of people who can come. But that would happen on a year without COVID. So we feel comfortable with choice number 2 of our families. Traditional ceremony with limited tickets, and you heard the numbers. So questions, thoughts?
It sounds like to me you're maximizing the people you can get in with complying with the executive order, so.
That was our plan.
Well, I think we should do what the kids want to do, however.
And this is still rapidly fluidly changing, you know, by the day. I mean, they just changed it 2 days ago, and then today it came out again. Maybe by the time we actually get to graduation, it's not gonna.
Oh, I mean,
It's not gonna
definitely.
matter anyway,
If it's, you know, 100% capacity, that changes things. If it's, you know, open sesame, that changes things, you know, just, like I said, things aren't changing rapidly, and that's easier to do, I mean, to do
Yeah,
it that
absolutely.
way than it is, you know, last year we had to go the opposite direction with that, you know.
I mean, part of that order that came out was a 50% capacity, which puts us at the 650, but there's an outdoor gathering limit of 5,000 people. Well, if we put in the stands and we have some people bring folding chairs, because I would rather sit in a folding chair than I would on them dang metal bleachers anyhow. we'll be well under 5,000 and everybody can just show up and have a holly jolly time and we don't have to worry about any of this nonsense. And we're technically still in order because we're under 5,000 people. The stands have their capacity. Anybody talking about sitting out in the middle of a grass field out there? We're under 5,000 people. And I can assure you there's a whole bunch of folks in this county would probably rather sit in their nice camping chairs that they bring to these games every day than they would up in the metal bleachers anyway. I don't know logistically if it would work for being able to face the students and things, but I honestly don't care at this point anything else the governor's got to say about this, but sorry, it's off my chest now, I feel better. But I think we'd still be in the intent of, under 5,000 people. I mean, what's your capacity for outdoor? It's the world, it's Earth. We know our capacity is at least a few billion right now, so. Sorry.
So we are happy to take direction from the board on this. We are happy to take direction from the board.
I will gladly take the arrest for it.
It sounded like to me you got the direction of an outside gathering is 5,000 people right now.
That's it. Capacity is 50%, but the limit's 5,000.
That's half the population of the county.
Just maximize the football field and surrounding areas.
Is that logistically possible? I mean, in all fairness, with the way that the students usually sit and to see everything, if we.
It's logistically possible. It's gonna take a lot of work, but it's logistically possible.
Is it
Sounds
that?
great, but I mean, if it's gonna tax y'all to the point by the time, I mean, graduation y'all are at point you're out anyway, because there's so much going on, but if it's gonna throw everything so far out of whack.
Yeah, I mean, it's logistically possible. It'll just take some work, and I mean, it'll be a matter of, getting the extra chairs, and the things like that we have.
Bring your own chair.
Yeah, bring your own chair.
Yeah, that's what y'all want.
See, simple. And I
I'm
mean,
very traditional like you, but yes, if that's what I think.
I mean, if we were to say bring your own chair and scoot the stadium back towards the baseball field to open up more space for students seating in.
Yeah, we've already talked
Yeah,
about
now
doing
I'm
that.
speaking of parents bringing their own chairs, not the students.
Right.
The students,
No, I
yes.
understand,
Yeah.
I understand,
Just to be
yes,
clear, I'm not saying tell the
yeah,
kids to
it
bring
is.
their
I mean,
camping
it's-
chair. right?
It's gonna take some more manpower because it's gonna make sure, you can't just have somebody go plop their chair down beside their kid and go, here and I'm not being funny, but
No, I know, I'm with you. Yeah,
it's
they've
just
gotta
gonna
have a
take
separated
making
area.
sure, if it's kind of open, anybody can bring a chair and sit wherever, you gotta have people in place to make sure they're not just sitting wherever, because we still wanna make sure, with that. So, I mean, it will be a little tougher logistically, but I mean, is it feasible? Sure. We made last year work, we can make work. Now, the only thing I do wanna add is that we're gonna have to offer, if someone's not comfortable for that, I feel like, we have a senior whose parent has cancer, is in chemo, and will not send their kid to campus for state testing for anything. I can't look at that parent and go, well, there's a graduation with 1,500, 2,000 people, and it's the only option you have. I don't feel comfortable.
No, and we're gonna have to do that even if we do it at a restricted number of
Yeah,
tickets.
so
I
we
mean,
are gonna
there's
have to
people who
offer
aren't gonna
some
come,
points
but.
individual, offer that to them.
Right.
One or the other that they take. So I just didn't want to throw that out there because I know there's at least, maybe one case, and I'm sure there's gonna be, maybe a
Yeah.
handful with that, just to keep it.
But that's gonna have to happen whether we do it as a ticketed 5 or
Yes,
6
sir. Yes,
people,
sir.
or we do it just,
Definitely, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
or maybe,
So-
maybe add another of the texts that have been coming out from the high school this week and say, would parents be okay if we were able to offer more people to be there, but they have to bring their own chairs and their camping
No, I mean,
stuff?
well, they definitely will. I mean, they're.
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem,
They
but
are, like I said, I just think, logistically, it will be a little difficult. We'll have to figure that out, but I mean, anything's doable to a certain extent.
And I wasn't advocating for unlimited attendees either necessarily. I mean, I know there's got to be some control and some.
Well, there either has to be, we're offering this amount of tickets, or,
Everybody.
yeah, I was gonna say, we can't have
I
them
mean,
do that and then
just-
say we can't have tickets,
Well,
but.
yeah, but I mean, what's the maximum amount of tickets you would offer in a normal year?
well, we don't in a normal year give tickets,
Well,
Unless it's in the gym,
unless
right?
it's at
Right.
the gym.
And then
that's
how
usually
many?
5 or 6, sometimes 7 if it's a small class.
so let's just say you limited
So
it
let's
to
say
10
10.
tickets per student for an outdoor gathering.
Okay,
I mean,
no,
that's just an idea.
No, I'm willing to do whatever. We can make it work. Like I said,
Would 10 get probably in line with about what our normal attendance would be? 10 per student, because not everybody's gonna bring 10. Some people are gonna wanna bring 14, but you know, their friend
Yeah,
doesn't need
I
all
think
theirs.
typically, you're looking at about 1,500 that typically come to graduation, so it's a little bit, 10's a little less than it would typically be, but, I mean, 10 tickets, I think, is a good amount, yeah. And I mean, you're not gonna have everyone, like you said, who needs 10, and I mean, they can figure that out, they can give it to somebody
Yeah.
who needs 4, you know, if that's the number we do. I do think some limit would help versus saying,
Yeah, and it's, yeah,
just
I
open the
agree. We
gates and let
can't just,
everybody, that makes me a
here.
little nervous, just
Yeah,
thinking of
yeah,
control,
that's
you
why I
know.
didn't want you to get confused with what I just.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah, I understand that.
and that's honestly not what my intention was, but you're right. It being that we're coming out of this whole debacle of a year and a half, it would probably be more than normal just for people to show up and say, I win.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yes, my apologies on that. 10 tickets,
No, yeah.
11 tickets, whatever. But motion for that, or just let them do-
We don't have to take any action on that.
Okay. Let's plan for that and hope that it doesn't matter by June 4th.
Okay, so we're clear, the two principals are clear about what the board wants for graduation.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Because here's the thing, parents wanna know, they're making plans for people to come from out of town and things like that, so are we gonna do 10 tickets? I just kinda want some direction with that, because I don't, they're gonna wanna know, is grandma coming from Ohio, or is she the 11th ticket? Okay, that's fine, as long as, okay, I'm good with that, I just wanna make sure there's not a directive from y'all that says,
Your crowd is every year. and how many
Staff already said they like that.
Okay.
And then
Man, for bears, unless somebody's got something.
open spaces was 75%.
Well, I mean, I think what she's looking for, and it would probably be
That's what I
our-
was
in her better interest and our better interest to give her a hard number so that she's not.
I mean, the number we were looking at was 5, maybe 6, to keep in with the executive order.
Right.
And then what I'm hearing is, no, we can go over that, but we're still gonna have a limit, so I just wanna know, like,
That's what I'm saying, I mean, I think we kind of deserve to give her a hard, number of this many tickets, so she's not having to make that decision.
How
If
many
something goes
graduates?
south. it's on
Ma'am?
us.
How many graduates?
we have about 90.
I think interest rates are still declining.
And like I said, I mean,
Unless
looking at that, I wasn't considering counting the graduates and staff in that, because I was thinking if you're in the stadium, they're the players and the coaches, right?
Cause that's the way that order is written, is if it's the players and then the athletic
They don't
staff,
count
they don't
into
count to the
half.
number. Yeah,
$2
it's the
right now.
attendees that
This one goes
count, so. That puts it nice.
Luckily, that's
10.
Yeah.
I think 10.
But I do think, we don't need to put that responsibility on her to come up with a number and have to guess. We need to give her something. I'd say 10 is fine with me.
What do you guys think? Yeah?
I say so.
And we hope that we can go up even higher as we, it's always easier to let more people in than it is to kick them out. So, yes, ma'am, 10.
Thank
That's
you.
fine with the board chair, I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, we direct her to go with 10, so she knows what.
We'll bang together.
Okay, so we have a plan. All right,
Any other questions?
As far as that goes, or in general?
As far as that goes, in general, I think we need to take a 5-minute recess.
We possibly squeeze in like a-
So we're in recess, yes.
my next question is gonna be if I can
reconvene the meeting. Yes, ma'am. So we're gonna have the 2021-22 budget presentation draft. Thank you, Ms. Norfleet.
I just passed out to you a new version 1 and a version 2 that we're gonna go over. The version I gave you 2 weeks ago changed yesterday because we finally got plan allotments from the state, which was a good thing. So those changes are reflected in version 1, and then there's also a version 2 that deals with CARES money. Dr. Farrell has a presentation that actually goes over each version and what's in it. And you each got, of course, the binder that has every school and every department, what was requested. And that's also kind of included as a summary in that PowerPoint. So that way you don't have to flip through the book the whole time. But I just thought it was easier to kind of let you look at everything laid out by school and by department. And then, of course, the proposed budgets, the 2 new versions. So you can disregard the first one. And then I'll let Dr. Farrell kind of take over the budget presentation PowerPoint. And if you have any questions, I'm just going to be in the corner.
Right, so you have a hard copy of the PowerPoint, right? Right, so this is the PowerPoint that I'm also going to be sharing with staff. Because one of the things in our one of the goals in our strategic plan requires us to do these budget presentations, and those are coming up the week after spring break. So talk a little bit about the timeline. I'll move fast on some of these. Talk a little bit again about the priorities that I set every year when it's budget time, and then taking a look at the last 5 years of operating. Going back to the 16-17 school year, you can see one column shows our total budget. One column shows what the county has given us for operations costs. And the last column shows what the county has given us for capital over the last 5 years. Talk a little bit, I've mentioned to staff several times about tightening the belt as we're building this new school. And a little bit about we're not exactly sure what that's going to look like yet. The next slide is funding losses, and I want to make sure that we're clear with people about some reductions in funding. Obviously, a little bit about the tier status going from tier 1 in 2019 to tier 2 in 2020 to tier 3 in 2021, showing the 4 things that the tier status is based on. Average unemployment rate, median household income, percentage of growth in population, and the adjusted property tax base per capita. Just kind of talking them through that. The loss of funding due to tier status for Cooperative Innovative High School funding, which is a total of $95,000. We lost 2 teaching positions when the planning allotments came out based on ADM, dropping from 1,885 students to 1,827.
Hold on. I thought they were gonna hold harmless on that.
They held us harmless this year. They're not holding us harmless next year as of right now.
Oh, great.
So that's a loss of 2 teaching positions, which is a total of $138,000. There are some other funding sources that we receive based on ADM, and we're estimating like supply money, for example. We're estimating about a $50,000 drop in other areas based on ADM decline, and the total losses would be $283,000. And then talk a little bit about the increased expenses. And you can see those there, particularly focused on retirement, health insurance, payments to charter schools. You can see across the past 3 years, retirement has continuously gone up. Health insurance actually went up last year, is dropping a little bit for the coming year as far as the cost is concerned. And then, of course, you see that we went from 2019-2020 paying $36,000 a year to charter schools to $50,000 this current year to estimated $95,000 next year. And so the total increases would be $158,000. And then talk about the budget requests. And so you can see on the next slide that Grandy Primary had a total request of for staff only of $341,439 over, meaning additional staff. CIS requested one intervention teacher assistant at $52,000. CMS had no staffing requests. Camden High School requested one English teacher at a cost of $68,840, and the early college, one CTE teacher and one math teacher for a total of $137,680. Central office, we have a child nutrition manager whose pay is out of line with the others, and then the transportation fueler to align with the local market. And so the total staff-related increase at central office was $6,615. We had a total staffing request of $606,626. And again, that is staff above what we currently have. And so, and then the other requests besides staffing fell right around $100,000 for a total of $706,626. So the question for us is, how do you merge $706,626 worth of staffing and other requests with $113,000 in increased retirement, with $45,000 in increased payment to charter schools over the current year, and a $283,000 reduction in funding? When you add those together, that's a $1.1 million difference between our current budget and the budget for the 21-22 school year, assuming that we added all those staff positions. And then just talk a little bit about, the questions that lead to how do you make budget decisions, and I'll talk with staff a little bit through that. Do we just simply go ask for additional money? Can something be reduced? Do we move people? How do the requests fit with the need to reduce? What will happen with summer school requirement? And just those different things. Title I funding with 17% free and reduced lunch now, which is extremely low. And will we get any additional CARES funding, and some of those kinds of questions. I want to talk a little bit about fund balance, because a lot of people wonder how much you might have in savings. So I want to be really clear that we have honored, at least in the time that I've been here, we have not gone over the $250,000 requirement that this board and the commissioners agreed to. In fact, the last 2 years, we've dipped below $250,000 in order to balance the budget. And as of June 30th, 2020, we were at $169,607. There could be an additional $22,000 could be utilized this year, which would bring us down to $146,871. And of course, the goal is to go back up to $250. And as you know, that changes yearly. If we come in and we are above that $250, then we would reallocate some of that money back into our budget. But at this time, in order to ensure that we can get back to the $250 at least, we are not allocating any fund balance into the 2021-2022 budget at this time. The CARES or ESSER funding, as you know, round one has already been spent. PPE, running the school system, purchasing other items during the school year. We covered the cost of the custodial contract and some of that. CARES 2, ESSER 2, we are just now really getting the information about that as far as what the money can be spent on, and exactly how much we are getting and all of that. And then of course, CARES ESSER 3 is the funding that is tied to the latest approved stimulus package. And we don't have any idea at this time how much that will be or what the guidelines will be for that. Just a reminder to everyone that CARES money is allocated based on free and reduced lunch. And Camden has consistently received the lowest amount in the state for CARES money. So compared to a lot of other places.
And what kind of difference is that? People listening might want to know.
So we received around 400 and something thousand 60 federal and state. And there isn't a district even in our area similar in size that received less than $1 million. So I recently had a conversation with someone in another district that is estimating their round three to be 50 million. And they were trying to figure out how they might spend that.
And one
Just
more
round
time,
three?
let the audience know how much we're getting.
We don't know how much we're getting for round three yet. For round two, we're at 498,000. So it's significant because, and you remember, that's what I reached out to our state board rep about. And what she has shared with me is that that's the decision that they've made to base it on free and reduced lunch. But there could be some other opportunities down the road. And if so, she will alert me to reach out to the state board to ask for some of that funding if there is some available.
Could we, contact or send a letter, make some sort of contact with somebody else beside the state board rep, to like our senators, representatives, anybody else who could possibly make some legislative changes to that?
So if I'm not mistaken, it's the state board that determined that, but I can confirm that.
It might be worth, going a level above.
CARES money, they dictated it to be based on.
Right.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, there was actually very little money that the state board was actually in control over of how it was divided out. It was kind of already in legislation, so it's probably a good idea. But it probably needs to go to the federal level. Right, because then, what we
Yeah,
heard in that
we,
webinar, a lot of it was
we
going
had a
to
couple weeks ago, I
webinar.
specifically asked, the state board chairman and, what's his name?
Is the vice
Directly
chairman.
about us, and he had already spoken to our state board rep, but they pretty much said the federal government said this funding is tied to free and reduced lunch. Basically, they're doing what all the titles say. It's, we're giving, federal government's giving it to you. This is how we base all our education decisions in this country is on free and reduced lunch. So the state, other than that 10% reserve, and as Sally said, he did say that there may be some other opportunities for us out of that reserve money that the state can control, but as far as the main block of the ESSER funding, the federal government said it's tied to FRL, and that's it.
And Jill Camden said that she would let me know when it was time to send a letter to the state board to request some of the reserve funding. So we will be ready when that time comes. So the two versions, that I have come up with to send or to take to the county with your approval. Version one is the version that keeps everything that we have right now. We have to understand that the reductions in funding, as well as the increases in the costs that we cannot control, all of that trickles down to local funding. And so if we did not use any of that $498,000 to help balance the budget and add a 3% cost of living increase for our non-certified employees, and let me talk about that for just a minute. So over the last whatever number of years, and it's been a number of years, teachers and people paid on the teacher pay scale, like counselors and social workers and nurses and others, and they have received an increase in pay, and principals and assistant principals have received that. The people who do not seem to ever receive that are your cafeteria staff, your front office staff members, our maintenance folks, our transportation folks. Now, bus drivers have received an increase because that's something the board approved. But so those folks, year after year after year, over the last few years, have gotten no increase. And then recently there was a story in the newspaper about the county employees getting a 3% cost of living increase. And so I just felt like that was another slap in the face of our classified employees who work so hard, and we can't, those of us who are certified certainly can't do this work without them. And so I felt like it was important to put that 3% cost of living for non-certified employees in there this year. And you can see that brings our total budget to 19,000 or 19,575,000. And then that would mean that the request from the county government would be $2,994,188, which is an increase of $394,188 more than they gave us last year in the last 5 years at the 2.6. Now, if we added in the 706,000 to honor all the requests that were made from schools, that would be a $3.7 million increase, which would be a $1.1 million increase. So option one is shooting for the moon, hoping you land among the stars, right? And then, of course, the capital request is $530,610 this year. So that's version one. Version two is the same thing, except using some of the CARES ESSER money, the $498,000, to make up some of that budget difference. And we could go to the county with a request of $2,620,000, and that would allow us, that would be $20,000 more than we asked for last year, but it would allow us to give that 3% cost of living increase to non-certified employees. And then, of course, there's the $706,626 again, which would make a $3.3 million increase, which would be a $726,000 increase over last year. So those are the two versions. Now, I went in with two versions last year, and they came up with a third version where they gave us the 2.6 million again, and then they gave us, you saw what they gave us for capital, and that would allow us to keep everything we have now. We'd have to use some of the CARES ESSER money to make up some difference, but we might not necessarily be able to do the 3% cost of living increase.
And how many years have we gone without an increase?
You say for classified employees?
No, I'm talking about
Overall
from the
budget.
county.
Oh,
She's talking about the local supplement.
6 years, I think.
It was increased my first year.
I think it's either been, I know for the last 5 for sure, it's been 2.6. No, they did increase our capital. But I want to say it was 1 year prior to the 5 that I put on here. I think it might have been 14, 15, was it?
They gave us a little increase my first year on the board,
What year was that?
5 years ago, I guess.
So maybe the increase went to 2.6. So maybe it went,
Increased my first year on the board.
so maybe it went to 2 points. You were elected in 16?
I guess, is that right, Kristen?
Yes.
Okay, so,
2.3 to 2.6.
so it's been
Yeah.
6 years since we got an increase, yes.
Yeah.
In operating expenses. So those are my recommendations for versions that I take to them. And of course, I will take the version that you all would like me to take.
The CARES money, that's like a one, we're not gonna get that every year, but.
I hope COVID goes away.
That's what I'm saying is,
I do too.
so we budget on that money, we're gonna set ourselves up to be in the hole next time around.
Yeah.
And of course, Commissioner don't see them filling that hole, so we're starting off, and I don't think we can plan on using that money in the budget. Well, we will, we have to, I don't think we could have.
It's an automatic $400,000 deficit we're walking in with next year,
Yeah.
right off the bat. I do think that we're year 5 or year 6 with no increase in the operating budget. 300,000 is probably not a bad ask.
I wouldn't think so.
That's saying, what, 60 grand a year and
If you divide that up, that's, yeah, like say 80,000 a year.
Yeah.
70,000.
480,000 a year.
And how many years have the non-classified employees gone?
We couldn't remember.
Really?
Yeah. Now they've gone up.
Years I was here previously, we never did, and then I was gone for 2, and so far we haven't either. And
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it didn't happen those 2 years I was gone.
Yeah, we couldn't remember.
Somewhere along the line, we got 1 or 2%, I think, somewhere in the middle there. It was like after the big bus there in 2008. We didn't get anything for a while, and then we did get something somewhere for a year or 2. But I mean, it's never more than 2%. And then now we've got at least, this is going into our 4th year.
Definitely need to do that. According to the CPI inflation calculator.
By not having done those cost of living adjustments, basically people have lost 10% against inflation.
John, would you care to prognosticate what 2021 inflation rate?
That's pretty good, John Lighty. You're the man.
And math is not my thing.
That's what we got Heath for.
So we are looking at, we chose 3% because that's what the county employees are.
I don't see how they can say no to that when they're doing, I mean, I can see them, but it'd be kind of messed up.
Yeah.
They did say no to that when they're doing.
So what I'm hearing you all say is take version 1 as the only version.
Well, actually, we take action on it at our next
Yeah,
meeting.
at the April meeting.
So it has time for review if you have any other input. Then we got updated versions now. At least they got them out before the budget process this year.
Yeah. But, we'll get direction from you, but, as of now, I'll be thinking along the lines of only taking that one.
Yeah, one question, the charter school, you're expecting that to double, why is that?
This year we budgeted originally 50, because they already started with that last year. This year I made a budget amendments to bring it to the 95, so that's why I'm budgeting 95 for next year.
95 is what we're spending?
This year, that's what we're.
That's because so many kids left because of
Right,
COVID.
but the original budget was 50, but we already had to increase it,
Alright,
so we're gonna have to
So this is where
increase it
we're
in
at.
the budget next year.
That makes sense.
Because currently, I think we're paying for, I think the last bill was 61 or 62 students from me.
Yeah.
We have 5 at, NC Virtual School. We have another one at a different virtual school that we're having to pay.
You know, that makes sense. I was thinking that 50 was what we were at now with all these kids that big.
Yeah, that's what was actually originally the budget.
That was the
last-
budget number.
For this
Yeah.
year.
That makes perfect sense. Like I said, hopefully some of them kids come back, then when we open them all 5 days a week, everything's all good.
Hopefully.
Get back.
Person, over $8,000 a month.
Anything else for budget?
Not at this time.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Sally.
I would like to make a motion, kind of backtracking here a little bit, to proceed with option 2 with the understanding there will be modifications and clarifications for outdoor learning spaces, including a greenhouse, field house, as well as a plan for additional space for growth.
I'll second that.
Can we run that one more time?
Yep.
Could you repeat your motion, Dr.
Will.
Banks?
To proceed with option 2 with the understanding there will be modifications and clarifications for outdoor learning spaces, greenhouse, field house, as well as a plan for additional space for growth.
What about with keeping that parking lot?
When he said
We
that,
need to-
he said he would put that in the bid. I asked him that.
When you say proceed, you mean
To give them permission
to give them permission to proceed with their continued plan.
Correct.
That's original, as I have one, is in the action.
So in other words, they're not gonna go back now and fiddle faddle with 4 with curving it and do it. They're gonna go off at 2.
If that's how y'all vote.
Well, that's what I wanted to make sure what the heck we're voting on.
I second.
Like I said, I mean, option 2 and option 4, there could be some melding of those two to get us where we want to be. But I mean, it sounded like everybody's more favorable with option 2, and that's what the vast majority of the staff and everybody kind of agreed on. So I mean, I just think we should allow them, it sounds like they're gonna do it anyway, but just for clarification and direction of what we want.
And it's $300,000 cheaper.
So Dr. Banks has made a motion, seconded by Mr. Heath. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Any other business for open session?
We recess open and go.
Motion by Mr. Purcell that we recess open session to go into closed session. Seconded by Dr. Banks. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We're in closed session.
I think you,